All right. Hey, everybody. We're going to do a quick little analysis of Andrew Benintendi using his baseball reference page. This is baseball reference. Yeah, there it is. Hi. I'm drinking a seltzer. It is whatever seltzer brand wants to sponsor me. And it is delicious. And it doesn't have a flavor, which I don't know why I bought those, but here we are. Benintendi just traded from the Royals to the Yankees for 3 lower level pitching prospects. And right now he is vying for time on that Yankees roster. Giancarlo Stanton is on the disabled list, and Tim LaCastro was sent down as a correlating move when he arrived. What are we looking at? We are looking at an outfield made up of him, Aaron Judge, then we have Joey Gallo, Aaron Hicks, and Matt Carpenter, who is playing right field for the Yankees, which is a little different, but, he also has a mustache like he's the Bizarro version of himself, so I guess anything goes. Tonight is Benintendi's first game with the Yankees. It is just about over, and as far as I can tell, he is going to go hitless tonight, but he was put in that leadoff spot, which is interesting. He was hitting second or third in a relatively anemic Royals lineup, and this might be the Yankees' plan with him, because look at this batting average at 320, at 387 on base percentage. Both look very solid as a table setter, a traditional table setter, not the modern way of setting up a lineup. So I'm curious whether Aaron Boone and the front office have plans to try and install a traditional table setter in order to manufacture more runs and keep things moving. So what we're looking at now, when we look back at his career, he started very young. He came up when he was 21 years old. If we look at this, he actually had like a pretty decent power showing in his first full season, and maybe pitchers started figuring him out in 2018, 2019, and he had to adjust his swing. And if we look at this, we see that he really used his gap power, which when we see guys in early 20s hitting 40 doubles and hitting enough home runs, generally that's a sign that they are going to grow into themselves and start mashing. And the interesting thing about Benintendi is he never did that. Now, while we're looking at this, I do want to keep in mind we are going to completely ignore 2020. That was an anomaly. That never happened. It was the fever dream that just existed in your mind. Keep that in mind. Otherwise, I think we see what the outlier on this page is, and it is the current season where he has this elevated batting average, and just his power is really non-existent. So we're going to take a look down here at these numbers. This is what I'm interested in right now, and what we're looking at is a very high batting average on balls in play, 366. And it's actually not exceptional because Benintendi has historically had excellent contact skills, but it's still much higher than anything since his very, very short 2016 season. Now, the other interesting thing to keep in mind is this isolated slugging, which is minuscule compared to his career. It's possible that he's been taking some tips from Whit Merrifield, who is a very similar player that has been in Kansas City for a very long time. He slaps the ball around. He's focused on making contact and hitting singles. And even if he is struggling this year, it's possible that he was able to teach Benintendi a couple things to get him on track in a way that he wanted to be. Maybe Kansas City was like, we see you as more of a leadoff man, more of a number 2 hitter in the traditional sense. And they suggested he do this, but it's working for him. He got an all-star appearance this year, even if it was just because he was the only Royal, doing well enough to go. It's something. We can look at the lowest home run rate of his career. We can look at also the lowest strikeout percentage of his career. Those are very important. And what that's telling me is he is going back to basics to try and figure out what was wrong with his swing. He had tapered off, and maybe that 2020 season had played a role in that. I really can't speak for Benintendi, but I think there's a lot of information we can get out of these numbers. So we have a pretty consistent hard hit percentage. He's still barreling the ball up. It's not like he is not getting solid contact here. What we're seeing is a pretty average ground ball percent, and actually an average line drive percent as well. So that is right in line with his career numbers. That's wonderful for him. That is a good sign that he is not doing anything wrong. Like, there's nothing sapping his power. It doesn't seem to be a health issue, which just goes consistently with what we've been saying so far. Now, his fly ball percentage, down 10% from the last 2 years, and that is probably the biggest deal in this section of his stats. Is he is not trying to elevate the ball, which was taught for a couple years there when we had those juiced balls and everyone was just trying to slap them out. Now, I think it's safe to say that Andrew Benintendi did not fit that mold very well, so he was the kind of player that was not going to adjust to that style of play. But now that that is not being encouraged for a large portion of players in the big leagues, we're seeing him have a lot more success. So his pull percentage is down. That's also an indicator that he's not trying to elevate the ball. That might change. He is a lefty in Yankee Stadium. They may try and get him to increase that percentage as he goes over there to get some cheap home runs. That's not a bad plan when you are in New York, but only time will tell on that one. Next thing we want to look at is his platoon splits, and they are interesting. He is a lefty and he has those traditional splits. So he has been playing versus both righties and lefties for the Royals. I am curious if the Yankees will continue to do that. The Royals pitcher in his first game was Brady Singer, and that is a righty. So it makes sense that he'd be in the lineup. If we look at his numbers versus righties, if we put him in a pure platoon, if we look at his numbers versus righties and put him in a pure platoon, that could really bring him to the next level. And who would we platoon him with, I think would be the first question there. Oh, hello. Yeah, so this guy, that's not even what he looks like. It's not the same person. You can't convince me that it is. If we go down and look at his platoon splits for the year, oh, yeah. I mean, I think we all understand that we aren't going to see Barry Bonds come back to life. But if we look at this batting average on balls in play, another lefty, but let's look at these numbers. And we can talk about this BABIP all day being at 462, but Matt Carpenter is mashing against lefties right now. Absolutely. Now, I was looking at all the other outfield options for the Yankees, and you have Aaron Hicks, who has pretty straight splits, and then you have Joey Gallo. Joey Gallo has historically done well versus lefties and righties, but if we look at his splits for this year, he's bordering on serviceable versus righties. And look at that versus lefties. So this is actually an interesting position for the Yankees to be in, where they have a number of guys who have historically done much better against right-handed pitching in their lineup. And it'll be interesting to see how they adjust to that. Now, Tim LeCastro, who is their quadruple A guy right now, he's bussing back and forth, is a lefty masher in his career. So I'm curious how long Joey Gallo's leash is right now and whether LeCastro could be someone that is thought of to be brought up in the near future and take a more significant role. Gallo and Hicks have had pretty poor defensive ratings this year. Andrew Benintendi ranks out pretty average. We're looking at an interesting picture in a very busy team, a very powerful offensive team. I think time will tell whether this was a good move. Personally, I think it's going to work out just fine for them. I'm curious how Joey Gallo is going to come through with all this. There's a lot of questions on this Yankees team, and we've seen a lot of regression from their starting rotation over the past month in particular. So I'm sure the trade deadline is going to give us a lot more exciting stuff. I'm fairly certain the Yankees are going to get at least one pitcher at the deadline, especially with Severino out. Side note, Benintendi loves hitting Severino, so lucky him. Lucky Sevy. When he comes back, he's not going to have to worry about facing Benintendi anymore. Yeah, I think that'll do it. Thank y'all for listening. If y'all enjoy this, please leave a like, please comment, and we can do some more of these looking at what to expect from trade acquisitions on their new teams, and if it's a more interesting trade on both sides, no offense to the young pitchers that were traded to the Royals, but they aren't going to affect the major league landscape this year, then we will look at both sides. So real quick, after talking about Severino, I wanted to take a look at Benintendi's best and worst matchups over the course of his career, and I think it's interesting to see that the highest amount of strikeouts we're seeing are not against heavy throwers. We do see Aroldis Chapman pretty high up and Tristan McKenzie, but also what we see is J.A. Happ, Charlie Morton, and CC Sabathia. So we got some crafty older guys a couple lefties on here, and I think that speaks to a couple of the weaknesses of Benintendi's. Now, if we look at who he has the most hits against, we see modern pitchers. We see Severino, Bundy, Barrios, and Tanaka. I didn't expect to see Tanaka on here. He really likes hitting some hard stuff. Like, these are not low-level guys. Like, we're looking at some very high competition with Sevy and Barrios and Bieber up there as well. Power numbers, David Hess. All right, so he saw Morton a lot. I feel like that gives us more of an idea of who Benintendi is. Thanks, y'all. Stay tuned, subscribe. I'm gonna drink my seltzer.